Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Carry On with Carrie podcast. Today I would like to welcome Mary Sorobey to the show.
Thank you, Carrie. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm excited about this.
Yes, excited, nervous.
Yes, all the good stuff.
Yeah.
So Mary Sorobey is the CEO of Sorobey Psychology. She is an addictions and self-empowerment expert as a registered psychologist with the College of Alberta Psychologists and the Psychologists Association of Alberta. She holds a master's degree in counselling. She's the owner and founder of Sorobey Psychology Centre. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, it sounds weird to have it read back to. Just simple things for me day to day, but yeah, exciting things I love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I've known you since probably about 2017, I guess, is when we met.
Yes.
And I saw you on Facebook with this new venture that you have here. You've authored one of the chapters in a new book called the Purpose-Driven Paycheck.
Yes.
How's that?
It's weird. It's not something that I ever thought I'd do. It was never something on a vision board or not something I was ever interested in. But one of the things that I do believe in is that if a door opens, we should see where that takes us. And so it was an amazing opportunity to work alongside 17 other authors. And everybody wrote their own chapter, kind of a little bit of their story of how they've taken something that they love and they're passionate about and made it into their paycheck.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And your chapter is called Discovering the Tiger Lily, Your Resistant Spirit.
Yes.
Or Resilience, sorry.
Yeah.
Resilient Spirit.
Resilience. Yes. So quick thing, tiger lilies have always been a really big part of my life as a child. Going out to my Guido's farm, there would be wild tiger lilies. And over the years, you pick them because they're beautiful and they don't grow back. They're not like the ones that you grow outside your house where you have all these things. The wild ones don't grow back. And I think it's like a handful of years before they replace themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I've always really liked them. And when we go camping in the forest, like when we're going camping out in the forest, you see them growing as well.
Yeah.
And so because they're not a lot of sun, there's lots of other things, there's animals trampling them, to see these beautiful flowers come, it just like represents resiliency to me. And I think that that's a big theme in the work that I do or the people that I work with.
Right.
And so that's where the title of the chapter came from. So
I love that. And we'll probably go back into that a little bit more later.
Sure.
So psychology, what made you go into psychology? And I'm so happy to have somebody on that's a psychologist and that's, that end of mental health. I mean, yeah.
Well, I think a big part, and I shared in the chapter, I always wanted to be a teacher was my goal. And I would play school and teach my stuffed animals. And that was the vision. In about grade 8, I had a friend at the time who, at that time was suicidal. Not knowing when you're in grade 8, you really don't know. You're just your kids and, people say and whatever. And so when the individual had shared that with me, we just talked and they ended up not following through and, got some support on their own or whatever. And it was kind of at that time where I started to realize a little bit where the power of having someone actually listen to you versus telling you what to do or dictating, just having a person just to kind of hear you, how powerful it was. And I think a lot of people would come to me even at a young age to talk about bigger topics. I wasn't a small talker.
Right.
I got called lots of not very kind names because I wasn't super friendly or out there. But then I kind of realized that there was that power. And I think it was about, grade 8, grade 9, where I just switched. And then I went to be a psychologist.
Right.
That was sort of the trajectory. That's where it went.
Right from there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, and so you must have had this, people trusted you to begin with, right? A trust, faith in that you were somebody safe to go to.
I think that maybe somebody safe or someone who wasn't going to go and tell everybody, I think was another piece of it.
Right.
Thinking back in grade 8, I probably should have told somebody, but I didn't. But I think that that's even a theme when I work with people now is they do feel safer. They feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feel judged. And I think that that's a huge part when people do go and talk to someone, whoever that is that they feel that way. Otherwise, they're not going to be vulnerable. They're not going to talk to you. They're not going to share that with you. So,
well, and that was at a time probably where it wasn't as open to talk about stuff like this, or we didn't have the resources to know it's okay to go and tell somebody.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And not take it on all yourself.
Absolutely.
All on your own.
Yeah.
For somebody then as a young person going through that right now, what can you suggest to them that would be a good idea, a good way to deal with it themselves if a friend comes to them with a problem like that, and what they can do with it? Absolutely.
I think, again, not repeating what I did, I would never recommend. I think being able to speak with an adult that you trust, whether it's your parent, whether it's their parent, sometimes there isn't a safe adult, but the majority of the time there is often someone. So really it's not about tattling. It's not about sharing a secret. It's about, this is a risk and we take it serious all the time. I think that sometimes people say, unfortunately, oh, they're just joking, or it's a kid thing, or they don't know. We never play with that. It's not something that we have the ability to tell you what someone's going to do and how quickly that can change.
Right.
And so I would always recommend that you're letting someone know. There's lots of crisis lines. There's a youth and teen crisis line. There's here in Edmonton area and surrounding areas, we have access 24/7. So really just not keeping it a secret. It's not something that youth and kids should be dealing with on their own. It's a really heavy weighted topic, or when someone's thinking that, our brain is not necessarily designed. We're equipped as human beings for survival, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so when our thoughts are going elsewhere, that means that there needs to be some supports put in.
Right. And not, I think part of that, if I'm right or wrong, is not taking ownership if something does go the wrong way. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't have, even in my role as a psychologist, unfortunately, I have had clients who have passed away, or even have committed suicide at different times and stages in my career. Not a lot, thank goodness. And I think your natural tendency is always to be like, what could I have done different? What did I do? And I think it's important for people, whoever you are, that it isn't never your fault, and you don't always have the power to change the trajectory. And it isn't your responsibility to do that, that it is very much, you can provide supports, and you want to cushion, and you want to build as much of a team network that you can, but not to personalize it. It's not yours to carry.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what led you into the addictions side of things? I just find it fascinating. I've got some history with it myself. So I'm just,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, again, addictions initially was not on my radar. I worked with youth. I worked with teens. I worked with families. And I was at a time where I wanted to change positions. And I do believe it was actually my mother-in-law who had found in the newspaper an ad for a family counselor, which is what I was doing before as a family school liaison. And so I applied, not realizing that the job was a family counselor in an addictions treatment center. An Indigenous treatment center. And I didn't realize until I got there. Historically, whether it's friends, I've had families who have struggled with addictions. Unfortunately, in our family, we have lost people to addictions. A lot, we've lost people even from friends, people who have kind of gotten too lost into that world. So I feel like I've been surrounded by it, that it was a natural thing where I could take input from all different directions, or be able to even have a personal connection to it. But it was having that door open and me choosing to take that job that got me into the addictions space. And I love it. I feel society as a whole has a stereotype or an image of what someone who has an addiction or a substance use problem should look like, where they should live, how they should talk, what their family should be. And my experience 95% of the time is it is never what people think it is. It's the hidden thing that a lot of people struggle with and misrepresent. And I think that the resiliency I see in the people that I work with is empowering to me, never mind being able to walk beside them in their journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So with that, so the correlation between, I mean, obviously they're directly associated, the addictions and the mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find addictions start because of mental health, or mental health leads to addiction?
The loaded question.
Yes.
You know what? The chicken and the egg. I don't know that we know the answer.
Okay.
I think for some people, the substance use leads to mental health concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And some people, mental health is already there. When I'm working with people, a big thing that I talk to a lot of people about is the substance use, which includes drugs and alcohol, is the solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the ultimate goal in the way that I approach working with people, or the way I view addictions or misuse or whatever, is we got to kind of figure out what's going on at the bottom.
Right.
And then we can deal with the top. It's not so easy as, families are like, just don't drink.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't drink, our life will be perfect. Oh, that's just not the way
right.
that it works, right? You have to kind of deal with what's underneath to kind of get there. So which one comes first? I don't know. I think that they're just super intertwined, and you can't deal with one without addressing or acknowledging the potential of the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And you worked in an addiction center, you said.
Mm-hmm.
How was that for you?
It was good. It was a partnership between sort of a government agency and then sort of a nonprofit. And so I was able to work on site within a program where it was 18 to 24-year-olds. But my initial role was to work with their families. Mm-hmm. So parents primarily at that age, really helping them understand that, there's sort of a saying that's called the 3 C's. And I'm not 100% sure who specifically said it, but it's not my words. It's, you didn't cause it, you can't change it, and you can't cure it. And really trying to help families realize that the only way they can help their loved ones is to take care of themselves. And that in itself is hard. And so building up programming for families, running groups with them in the evenings, and then also working with the young adults with being able to talk about families, or, using fun mediums through music or art or talking or activities, starting to talk about the topics that they struggle with the most, communication, family, relationships. And so I really enjoyed it. I loved my time doing that. But staying in an environment that had so many parameters as to how can I support someone and how do I work, started to not work for me, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
You started to evolve from that. And so where did you kind of go from there?
Well, when I'm a mother of 2 children. And so when my oldest was born, who is now 12, I did go back to work after mat leave, and I still did I started to do some private practice at that point because I had just gotten registered. But I would do that on the weekends and I'd work full time. And so then when my second was born, it was really an opportunity where I was like, I'm going to take an extra year off and I am going to crash and burn or make this work, is really what it came down to, that I really wanted my own freedom. I wanted to be able to work with individuals that I maybe wanted to work with. I wanted to make my own parameters. And so that's sort of the segue into the Sorobey Psychology and Sorobey Psychology Centre that I'm currently continuing to grow.
Right.
Was being able to, have my own autonomy. And I think in the chapter, I do talk about, the uncertainty and the anxiety and the fear of, okay, I'm leaving a government job, which most people would be like, stay forever. Why would you give up pensions and benefits and, guaranteed income? And I think it's just a big part is sometimes those risks we have to take because our heart's not where we want to be. And when if we're going to work and we're not happy and we're miserable, it's not the life that I wanted to live. And so I needed to take a risk, scary risk.
Yes.
Luckily it's worked out, but, take that big risk for sure. Yeah.
And so in that, so that transition, that comes with a lot of stress and anxiety and probably, a low paycheck here and there.
Yes.
Which leads to all those things as well. How did you find yourself dealing with that?
I feel like it was like a whirlwind between having 2 kids at that point. And because I am highly independent, trying to be like, okay, I don't want my husband to know if I'm struggling, even though he would, but I want to do this all on my own and I got to figure out. And so even times looking at your bank account and, you got $5 or maybe you're in the red that particular month, it's very anxiety provoking. And I think a big thing for me was, again, resiliency is a theme that comes up a lot in things that I do. And just that idea is I was always like, no one's going to tell me I can't do this and I got to figure it out. And so I started to take on different contracts or employee assistance, which a lot of times some psychologists don't want to do those things because you don't get paid very much. And they might not be what you want. But it was sort of the vision of where I wanted to go. And I didn't really care. It was like, this has to work.
Right.
Yeah.
So then would you say that you were very goal driven then because of that? Did you actually sit down and you had how did you find yourself? Or was it just kind of go with it and see what kind comes, have faith?
I think it was sort of just, it evolved.
Yeah.
It just kind of came. And, I wish I could say I was a person who believes in luck or things like that. But I think that when you can keep your mind open and you can pay attention to the doors that open, because I think a lot of people miss doors, right? Like there's things that come your way and you're just like, yeah, I can't, or I don't want to, or your brain thinks about doing something and you're like, yeah, that's not going to work, versus why won't it? Why can't you try and do something and see what comes from it? At the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, you're still ahead.
What do you have to lose?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you take those leaps and look what you've got right now.
Yeah.
Like the opportunity how did this come to you? The opportunity to be an author?
So the book opportunity was kind of interesting. Sorry. That there is a magazine. It's called Brains Magazine. It's an international magazine. And I had a gentleman through there reach out to me to ask if I wanted to be an executive contributor to this magazine.
Okay.
And my philosophy is just say yes. That's okay. We'll figure it out when we get there. And so I said yes to that. However, I have not written an article for them, but I probably should get together and get that going. But in that, there's like a group that you get to be a part of. And this lady who organized the book, Gina, had put sort of a post out there just doing this thing and asked for like people's expertise in what they do. And I was like, okay, just put your name, just put it out there. So you kind of have to do a chat and an interview, and then she chose the authors. And so that's how that opportunity came. It just came from seeing something, which at random, by chance, I saw that one post and taking the chance to put my name on it. And then now I got to be part of this really amazing opportunity. And then I'm sitting here with you talking, like listening to myself talk. It's so crazy. It's like a surreal feeling of just loving what you do and just it being able to open some doors that you just didn't think were going to ever be there. So,
right. Yeah, and that's how I feel too. Having started this podcast, I keep saying I can't believe it's led to this person. And then you open that door and all of a sudden all these different opportunities start to open up with you. I even just seeing it was divine timing, I think, when I saw your Facebook ad about it, and not ad, but just your post. And so it just shows that when you take that leap of faith, yes.
Yeah. And I love that I'm sitting here and you're saying that, because I think that we live in a world where more and more people are becoming fearful of doing things. And so to sit across from another woman who's decided to take a chance, right? Anxiety, fear, all those things are like, what if I fail? What if people don't like it? But to have that conversation that it was fun. We did it. It was okay.
Right.
And I hope that, one of the things with the book is I hope that if people do get it, and even if they don't, but even just through the conversation, is the idea of like, anyone can do anything that they love.
Yes.
Anyone can create this. Anyone can take this chance. They just have to believe in themselves. And I think, the other piece too is I talk to a lot of people with work, and a lot of times people don't take risks because they don't have someone cheering them on.
Right.
Right. They're like, well, everyone's telling me not to, or no one's agreeing and no one's supporting. And it's important. Like when I'm working with women, I always say to them, I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're cheering you on, if you want it and you can cheer yourself on, which is hard work, right? Like I think it's being able to be your own positive motivator is draining, but it pays off, and you won't always have those people cheering you on initially.
Right.
But yeah.
And that's because we were talking about that before we started recording, is the naysayers.
Yeah.
And it's like, really, are the naysayers in your own head, or are they, you know what I mean? Because I know mine can tell me all the things that why I shouldn't do something,
Yeah.
or, but yeah, to just, all those good things will come with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if there's bumps, and if there are naysayers, who cares?
Right.
Right. They don't have the power to take away what you've done or what you're doing, or, you know, there's always that thing of every time you put something out there, there's somebody who needed to hear it, or there's somebody who can take value from that.
That's right.
So,
and I know that's what I keep saying with this, is as long as I know one person has possibly heard it and gotten something out of it, that's all that I kind of wanted to start this for, was, you know, the conversations. I know there's a lot of shows and podcasts now on mental health, which is great. It's finally coming to the forefront. People are able to talk about it a lot more. I mean, I'm always surprised when I ask my guests, like, what are you comfortable talking about? And 9 times out of 10, everybody's pretty comfortable, you know, talking about most things. So that's huge.
Absolutely.
And that's just been within the last few years, I think.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because I just attended an online conference with the Canadian Addictions Counselling Federation. And they gave us some new statistics around like mental health and addictions. And so prior to 2020-ish, our statistics were about 1 in 5 people would be impacted by addictions or mental health, or combined. Unfortunately, our statistics that were recently done, I think they were earlier this year, is 1 in 2. So we are now at about 50% of people will be impacted, or they themselves will have one or both of those. And I think it's interesting because even today I was on site at a big company, and people can sign up to come and connect and talk. And even in like an 8-hour time frame, 3 people signed up. And the people that do, some of their feedback is, well, people are still scared to talk.
Right.
People are not sure what to do, or people don't think talking is going to help. And I think that that's a hard part. And a lot of the people that I work with in my practice, because I work within that safety sensitive sector, are males. And so it's always interesting when they do come and talk, because they don't necessarily want to talk, or they are like, this is never going to work, or, you know, whatever it is, whatever stereotypes they're bringing. And so I think that we are getting better at talking about mental health, but I think that we're still missing a big population, and hopefully that'll slowly come.
Right.
But it's still very hard for people to admit that they're struggling, or that they are having a hard time, which is unfortunate, because I feel like everybody's having a hard time. Everybody's struggling. Everybody is muddling through at some level. And if we aren't talking about it, that's where we get isolation, increased depression, higher anxiety levels.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's partly why I know, even for myself, with my work companions, with friends, and, you know, I did hide it for a long time with my depression and different things. And I talk about it. I still have moments, you know, where, you know, I'm not quite sure who I can trust or who I can say what to. But I think that's the thing. If one person starts to hear another person open up a bit more, they'll feel comfortable too as well.
Yeah. It kind of just
the trickle effect.
It just kind of takes away that secrecy, or that negative energy around it, where it isn't. I mean, sitting and hashing everything out might not always be appropriate, but I always say to people, it's okay. Like, you know, when people come in, you know, your first question, how are you doing? Oh, good. I'm like, are you? No, Mary, I'm not. Like, thank you. If we're just going to be real and be honest, we can do work. We can connect. We can actually have real bonds with people. But when everything is on the surface, it doesn't serve anybody. It really. And I know we can't sit and talk about, you know, just out for coffee all the time. You're not going to bring everything up. There has to be a lot of positivity and gratitude, but it's okay to say, today's not a great day for me. Right. That's okay.
And it is okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's also okay to say, I'm having a great day.
Yes, that's true.
Everything's going great. So with the book itself, staying humble. I know you you mentioned that part of it, keeping you humble. Now, how do you?
So I think that in terms of my work, it keeps me humble because the people that I'm working with, some of them have big stories to tell.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually talking with a group that I run today, and I told them all, I said, you all need to write your story. You just need to write out. And it doesn't even have to be people who have addictions. Everybody needs to write their story because it's so powerful, and what you do. And that we can't assume we know what someone else is going through.
Mm-hmm.
We can't hold the grudges and be angry and mad all the time because that's not our story. We have to kind of do our own. And so I think there's the humbleness for me of just knowing, like, I'm just one person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to change the world. And when I was young in my career, as a youth worker, I had a supervisor who made a profound impact on me. And when I went into the interview, his question to me was, "Are you here to save the world?" And I kind of looked at him and I was like, "No, I don't think that's possible."
Mm-hmm.
And I got the job right away. And so it was just really interesting because that whole thing is just, we are just one person. We can't save people. We can't always change the trajectory. But I always say to people, I can walk alongside you and hopefully help you see things that you can't see, right? It's kind of like being a flashlight for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't ever take their stuff or make them my own. I don't take credit for their things, that kind of stuff. And I think when it came to the book, with writing the book, as I was sharing with you, and whether my family appreciated it or not, no one knew I was doing this project. I had lots of other things going on, and I sort of just did it in secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
And it could have stayed that way because I would have liked that, because the attention that comes from it makes me uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Or sharing things on my Facebook where it was like, I just want to put that out there and lots of people will read it, but my closest family don't need to.
Right. Yes.
But then of course I did have to share with them.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important to be humble because
Mm-hmm.
again, just one person, that's just show up.
Right.
I think, yeah.
And now you're one, and the power behind that though,
Yeah.
is you're that one person who took a chance and participated in this, and there's 18 other authors and they're all women.
They're all women, but I think there's two that are like partners.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Two husband and wife pairs that have built their own purpose-driven paycheck in there. So the rest are women though.
And that's why I apologize. I've read your chapter and Gina's. Gina Redzanic is the author.
Yes. Well, she's the lady who
kind of coordinated
it all.
Okay.
Where she kind of brought everybody in, kind of handpicked who she wanted to be in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the thing with the book is, the other unique piece about it is, a lot of the people in the book are social media marketers, or I think there's a real estate, realtor. Sorry, I'm getting my words mixed up. Another one of the couples, I think, has like a financial kind of business that they built. And so mine was a little bit different because it was psychology. And I think I might be, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think I'm the only one from Canada actually in the book as well. Nice. It's a more of an American.
It's just from North Carolina.
Based. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of hearing some of their things and stuff. So.
No, that's amazing. And so you shared something with me when we were talking, and when I called you, and you said it's called Our Biggest Fear. It's, can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, you bet. So it's a poem that I came across when I actually worked at the treatment center that we talked about earlier. And it was sort of on the wall. And so obviously it's not mine. I will tell you the author. But the poem in itself just really represents, and it comes up a lot for me when I'm working with individuals, and sometimes even specifically, I see it with women in terms of self-doubt or different things. So I'm going to read it to you because you told me to bring it. And so I'm just going to share it with you because I think that it's empowering. I think it can put some insight for people to think about. So usually when I share it with people, they're like, oh, that's different. Okay. And so it is by Mary Ann Williamson, is the author of this poem. And it's called Our Deepest Fear. So I'm going to do my best not to stumble on my reading here, but we will see how this goes. So it says, our biggest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your plain small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. As we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, presence automatically liberates others.
Yeah. That says it all right there.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
love
amazing.
that.
I get chills.
Yeah. And I think even just as we're talking and sitting here in some of our conversations, it is that. It's like those fears of being great, or what if I do something I make someone uncomfortable, or what if someone doesn't like that? And I just find it very powerful for people to look at it from the other perspective, is maybe you're just afraid of how great can you be, and how much do you have to offer? Because I think that that's an unknown potential,
right?
That people are afraid of.
Yeah, and if you're used to kind of hiding in the shadows and just existing and doing your thing, which is fine too. There's nothing, but it's okay to take those, the big leaps.
Absolutely.
I keep saying leaps, but it's true.
I agree. I think it's true. And I think even, when you say it's okay to kind of be the person who blends in or is in the background, I think that they have a lot of power and potential just in that own space, right? And I think that the thing, the poem speaks to, not that we have to go and do huge, big things or be out there, but it's having a faith and belief in yourself that you're capable, that there is no reason why you can't do the things that you are thinking about or wanting to. I mean, my brain doesn't think about certain things. I don't, I think I write about in the chapter, I don't think about opening a cleaning company or becoming a mechanic or opening a shopping store. Those are not things my brain brings in, but my brain thinks about, I want to support people with addictions. I want to build a bigger company. I want to have treatment stuff. I want to work with companies to educate staff and employees. So I think that no matter where you are, you have potential, and it's important for people to not be afraid of that.
Right. And to take, because you could, just taking a class, bringing a new hobby.
Absolutely.
Things like that. It's all stuff that if you challenge yourself on your own level and be confident in that.
Yes, I like that. Yeah. For sure.
So you mentioned that, there's all women in this book, but you work mainly with men?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
I think partly because of how I kind of fell into sort of the addictions world, which does have males and females, of course. And I think more and more we are seeing more women who do struggle with alcohol use, or it becomes more mainstream, like Mama Juice and all of those things, right? Yes. Yeah. All the shirts, wine 2020.
Time. And like it became cool to drink while you...
Yeah.
Right.
During those times, which I don't like to say the word, but during those times when everything kind of went sideways, we even honestly saw the healthy guidelines go up. They changed slightly, and then they decreased now post, which is very interesting in terms of what was considered allowable and not. But either way, there are both men and women, of course, and everybody, within that scope. But within my work, I do a lot of assessments, workplace assessments, and they tend to be safety sensitive jobs. Okay. And yes, there are women that come in through there, of course, but the primary population is males. And so I tend to see more of them and work with them because of just the demographics and the companies that I work with and alongside. Yeah.
Interesting. And so what is your role in that?
So sometimes it can be completing the assessment. Sorry. So they come in, I complete a complete assessment that has some tools and a bunch of questions, history, to kind of determine how problematic is their use. And so a lot of people use language like addict or alcoholic. Those aren't professional words per se. Those are not words that I use or that we would use. That's more community-based type programming, or individuals may identify that way. And so my role is to find out at what level is their substance use, is it problematic or not? Because they're in safety sensitive positions, if there is any concerns, there has to be recommendations for them to remedy that, because it potentially puts them and people they're working with at risk, is what it comes down to. And so my role is to do that, provide recommendations if there is any, and in some cases support people to access treatment, and then sort of do a follow-up appointment with them to find out how did it go.
Right.
I also do aftercare work with them. So when they've completed something and they kind of are in that abstinence stage, trying to support them to maintain that. And so developing tools and strategies to help them, or even just doing some of the counseling space, of course, as a psychologist, about dealing with what is the underneath stuff. And so again, I think I had mentioned, my viewpoint is more about not why, or not what specifically it is, but why are you doing that, or what is that filling what space?
Right.
And so I think for men, I think it's really powerful to work with them because you do have sometimes these men who come in and they're big, strong, burly men. Maybe they rode their motorbike or whatever that is. And then they're sitting on your couch and they're crying. And so I think that there's a really powerful message there, that when they're able to be vulnerable, they can do some work and maybe deal with what they need to.
Right.
Yeah.
So is it something, okay, so for like a work program that, if you ask for help with that work, is that kind of...
Yeah. So not each company. So some of the smaller companies might not, have, you have an employee assistance program, which would be where you have a contact number, you can call them. Sometimes you can just talk to someone, or they'll connect you with a counselor. So they're meant to be short-term. They're not meant to be long-term, 6 to 8 kind of sessions, just kind of help you get some resources and maybe figure some things out. A lot of people don't look into their benefits. So your extended health benefits, there's some companies that give up to $4,000 for people to see psychologists.
Right.
And so always looking into that to find out what do I have, what coverage, and then who can I see? And it's not about that you have to see a psychologist or a therapist or any of that. It's just figuring out who are you seeing. And if you aren't able to pay out of pocket, ensuring that you know what your benefits covers, because there's certain professions, or I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, Carrie. My mind's kind of like labels or titles, or that might not be covered. And so just being sure that you're aware before you kind of go in and do that.
Right.
Other things that I tell people is there's helplines that you can call. I think I mentioned earlier when we were talking about youth, we have Access 24/7.
Which is in my link for every episode.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, they know every resource in and around the area that you can contact, and whether it's addictions, mental health, and they can support you. I think the other thing that people don't know, or maybe they don't utilize, is your doctor can also refer you to the primary care network, which also has therapists, counselors, psychologists.
Right.
So there is help out there. Sometimes the wait might be, a handful of weeks, sometimes not. But if you are wanting help, it's help. There is help. You just have to reach out and ask.
And ask for it. Somehow, some way it will come to you.
Yeah.
And so with the anonymity of that, though, through a workplace, I find like I work in a little bit of safety where I am, and just being able to tell people, if there is a problem, if you wind up having a problem and you at work, for instance, how does that work with those programs?
So with the EAP itself, it's separate from the company. So it's kind of like you get a number, you call. Sometimes with some of the EAP that I've done, there's a specialized stream. And so a manager or an HR rep might directly refer them. So in that case, there is updates and reports that do go, but again, they're very brief. And most time with the individuals I work with, I'll read them my report because I feel like this is about you. You want to know what I'm saying. It's quite generic. It's just really making sure that they know that we're not, I always say to them, so that they know that you're not just coming and having coffee with me. Right. Like we're doing work. There's something that we're doing. Sometimes, different companies, they have different policies and procedures, but we also do have, HIPAA and FOIP and all these things that are supposed to protect confidentiality as well.
Right.
So sometimes, unfortunately, there are people who might not feel comfortable going through their employers. And that's where, again, trying to access support outside of work, if that's what you feel more comfortable with.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I guess I like to put that out there because a lot of people will hesitate just based on that.
Yeah.
And the shame and the guilt that comes from that, right?
Yeah.
But what is your experience, especially once somebody finally does come to that point where they, realize they have an
Mm-hmm.
issue or a problem that they have to work on. What is, I mean, does it vary, I guess, probably from everybody for every situation?
Yeah, I think, sorry, I think it depends on the company.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes even just a person's crew, right? Because sometimes people can go, if I'm working with someone and they're going to treatment, sometimes they go back and no one has, they just think that they were off on a leave. They have no clue. Unfortunately, our world isn't always perfect, and it doesn't, and sometimes people have gossiped or people have said something that they shouldn't have. And I wish that there was a way that we could, as an optimist, that we could make sure that never happens. And unfortunately, we can't. But the majority of the time, most people give me the feedback that no one was really aware. The hard part for people, though, is especially when there is testing in the workplace, someone knows you went for a test. And if all of a sudden you're not there, they know that you tested positive. And so that can create some of that tension as well. However, I don't know if there's any way around that. The specifics of what happened after that, again, that confidentiality is supposed to be maintained. And for me, myself, I mean, I can't share information with anyone without consent. And so no one can ask me or call me or, hey, do you know this person? Obviously, there's that confidentiality from my space anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
I just think that's good for people to know.
Yeah.
And I guess ultimately, and it's easy to say without being the one that's in that situation, but you can only control what you have and what you know and what you say.
That's right.
What other people's opinions are, and that's exactly what it is. Somebody else's. It's just very hard to remove it from, especially if you're in a place of vulnerability and.
And I think that vulnerability and that fear is one of the biggest hindrances. And you've already mentioned this a few times today. Is one of the biggest hindrances is people don't want to reach out because of these fears, which are valid, right? Like we can't pretend that it doesn't happen.
No, it's human nature.
Yeah, and which is unfortunate, but it's true.
But it's true.
Yeah. But I think that the other piece of it, though, is when you're really, really struggling, if you don't ask for help, it gets worse. And, again, within sort of the addictions realm is you might think it's okay, but if you continue to avoid and you're not transparent and you're not being vulnerable, unfortunately, that ball spirals and people lose everything because they were too afraid in that middle point. Afraid someone was going to find out. Yet, let's say they show up at work and they're intoxicated. Well, now everybody knows. Right. And so sometimes it's, recognizing that, again, going to that concept of like when our brain brings something up. So I always say to people, when you first got that inclination of like, maybe this isn't so great, or, maybe I'm drinking too much, or every time I do it, I feel bad, or I can't stop. I'm like, once you start to do that, if you didn't do anything from that, right? Like, because people do that and they don't have a problem. It's just because you drink, or even if you drink every day, one drink doesn't mean that you're going to fall in these criteria.
Right.
But it's when you hit certain areas and you're not doing anything about it. Right. And so it's like, once your brain tells you this isn't feeling right, you got to figure out, what am I going to do? Am I going to talk to someone? Am I just going to go see a counselor? Am I going to just not consume something? Do I need to read a book? Whatever that is, right? It's that you've actually done something about it once you think about it.
Right. Once you've finally gotten to that point where you realize. Now, I guess back to the chapter to the book, in order to get that purpose-driven paycheck.
Well, I think that some of the big things for people, and we kind of chatted about them already a little bit, but is not allowing your fear. So we talked a lot about fear of people judging, the naysayers, the fear of failure, whatever that is. So not allowing that to stop you. So if there's something that you genuinely want to do, it doesn't mean that you're going to become a millionaire. Like, I think that was the other thing about this book was people were like, oh, money, like, yeah, you became a millionaire. It's like, no, far from that, not even close. But it's that you want to get up in the morning and you want to go and do what you want to do. And it might be a hobby. It might be on the side, or it could be your job, but not letting the fear stop you, because I think it paralyzes us. And then we sit there. And then what I see a lot of people go through is they become resentful and angry because they can't move. They're not willing to take the risk. And so I think a big piece in my journey is I've taken lots of risks and not knowing whether I was going to fall flat on my face or not, but I was willing to try it, I think is a really big one. Another big thing is, making sure that you are taking care of yourself.
Yes.
It's very easy to burn out. And I would say that I've had numerous times in my life where I'm like, oh, okay, if you don't slow down, you're going to like crash and burn. And there was periods of time where even just my own health, what is it called? Like adrenal burnout kind of thing,
Yep.
Seeing a naturopath where that was very much part of my life. And it was like, okay, but I can't stop everything. But if I don't focus on this side, I'm not going to be able to go. So I think it's also about being able to manage your energy, know when you have to slow down. It's okay to stop. It's okay to pause. You don't need to accomplish everything in 3 months, right? Like this is not it's a journey to get where you want to go. The other thing is like making connections. And so because I talked earlier about, I'm not a big small talker. And it's something that I've had to come to terms with in my life in terms of like, again, people being like, well, you're snobby or you don't talk or you don't have a personality or, being younger and having that horrible B word, when people are saying things and you're just like, I don't know, like I'm not a mean person. I'm actually very caring, very empathetic. I just don't like small talk. And so I think starting to make connections, whether it's, someone you're going to the gym with, that mom that's standing at the corner, or you just don't know where those connections are going to lead you and what doors they're going to open. The other thing that I talked a little bit about is perfectionism. And so I think that that's a big, if I can give anybody any tip about things, is you will never be perfect. And if your goal is to be perfect, you're going to fail every time. Unfortunately, that's the one thing we will fail at. And it's knowing that the whole point of growing, the whole point of building something is you're going to make mistakes and it's not going to work out every time. And you might have to, stop and pivot along the path, and that's okay. And if you're not having to do that, then maybe you're not doing it the right way, right? Like if it's coming so smoothly, then maybe there's something you're missing, because it should be challenging. It should be hard. You should question at times, is this what I want to do? And there'll be that piece in you, that gut sense that you're like, yeah, this is exactly where I need to be. And so I think dropping the perfectionism.
To trust that gut.
Trust that gut. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's a huge piece. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's okay. So that's, when I looked at this, I'm like, well, which way could we go with this conversation? Because there's just so much and you have so much to offer. And one thing I ask everybody on the show is if you could tell me what is one of the last best things that you do at the end of your day or before you go to bed?
Oh,
I know.
I'm like, I can tell you what I should do before I go to bed.
Or something you could recommend.
Honestly, before I go to bed, I literally just get comfy. I lay down, I roll over, and I go to sleep. But a thing earlier in my day is I have to wash my face. And, sometimes it's just that very simple time. And I notice more and more, as an only child when I was younger, being alone was the last thing I wanted to do. And I think growing up with my friends, I was like, always like time. Now that I'm older and I have kids and all of that fun stuff, quiet time and being alone, having some space to myself is like amazing. And I think when I'm washing my face or I'm kind of in my space, that's kind of how I end my day. And in my mind, I will kind of go over, sometimes something that I'm grateful for, or just remind myself that today I did the best I can and tomorrow I can do better.
Right.
Yeah.
And are you happy with the direction that everything is going right now on the path that and what's coming ahead? You have a few different things coming up, or?
Well, not a whole lot of things. Like I'm happy of where things are, but again, I don't have a vision of where they need to go or where they're going to go. And I think like even the book came and then you had messaged me and I was like, okay, sure, let's do this. And then I know with the publishing company, it's called She Rises Studio. So it's women empowering women. Actually, they have a Felix TV, they have TV shows, they have all these things where there's all these opportunities at any point for people to kind of take part. And I know I do a podcast with them in November as well, a little bit about the book. But I think that I'm kind of at a place where I don't know what's coming next. And that's exciting, right? I think we were talking early when I was saying I was kind of nervous about being here. I didn't want to mess up. I didn't want to say the wrong things, and kind of that flipping of, anxiety and excitement feel the same. And so, just kind of excited where things might go or what might happen moving forward, I guess.
And okay, you had the conclusion in here that you bloom. Your dream is yours, and to pursue your passion is a blessing. And while not everyone will understand or endorse it, your purpose-driven paycheck allows you to live intentionally. I like that.
Yeah. It's powerful.
It is powerful.
It's powerful because we can't change the world. And unfortunately, we can't change the trajectory for everybody else. But if we're intentful in what we're doing and we're purposeful in what we're doing, or at least we're trying to be, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I make lots of mistakes every day, whether it's as a wife or as a daughter, as a friend, as a mom. That's going to happen. That's what life is. But it's the purposeful intent of wanting to do well. I think we live in a world that's not kind, and it's getting worse. And so I think kindness and understanding, we don't have to agree with everything in the world, but we do need to come with a lens of purposeful and intentful caring and kindness. And if you can live your life that way, hopefully you can live your career and your job as well and get value.
Right.
Yeah.
And in all those tips that you gave there, giving that back to yourself, giving yourself those graces and kindnesses and caring moments is that's all we can do at this time in the world.
Yeah, we're the only ones that we we often rely on others to fill our tanks. They can't do that for us. That's not their job. They're not responsible for our feelings. I talk to people all the time about, like, people don't make us feel any way. We react to their behaviors, and that creates an emotion, and we choose to do what we want with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm like, I talk a lot, but
no, it was amazing. This was, you're a tiger lily. What else is there to say?
Thank you.
You're amazing.
Thank you, Carrie, so much.
Where can people find you? I'll have a link in the program or in the description on the program, but
I do have a website, just SorobeyPsychology.com, that you can go to. It has my information. I'm also on LinkedIn. I think it's under Mary Sorobey on there, or Sorobey Psychology Centre. So people can find me in those places. You can also just probably Google my name, and things will pop up as well to kind of get you to where you need to go if needed.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you. And if anybody has any questions or anything, I'll have all of this downloaded, and you can ask on the show. I appreciate myself. I am not a mental health expert, and I don't claim to be. I just am coming from a place of my stories. But I do appreciate your perspective on all of this. It's been really good conversation. If you feel comfortable or compelled to share the podcast, I would love that. I'm on Instagram at Carry On with Carrie _podcast, and Carry On with Carrie on Facebook. So
awesome. Thank you so much. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day or evening.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Wash your face.
Wash your face before you go to sleep, and be grateful.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.